Hi, this is Paula with Sheep's Clothing in Valparaiso, Indiana, and I'm here to share with you some strategies for working the 21 color slouch. And this hat here is from a kit by BlueSky Fibers, and it's part of their Traveler series. And it's really fun to work through all the 21 colors of their lovely wool stock, a very pleasant woolly yarn to work with. But two things that come up are you've got 21 colors, so you've got at least 42 tails, and you're using a lot of these more than once. So actually, I stopped counting when I got up to 60 tails. It'd be 60 plus tails if you did this conventionally. And another issue too is color jog. When you're working in the round, and this little swatch is obviously not in the round, but it helps you to see this point. If you focus on the white row here, you will see here's the first stitch of our pretend round, and over here is the last stitch, and we would very much like them to be next door to each other. I'm going to wiggle this a bit to make them be next door in a smooth continuous line, but really they end up looking like this. So you have this phenomenon called color jog at the row change. And peeking on Ravelry, a very helpful person there, she goes by initial J. Malaire. When she worked this hat, she used a bit of advice from the Tech Knitting website. And they call this their jogless color stripe. And so I'm going to show you that today. And what's so cool about it is it takes care of the tails and the color jog in one motion. So I'll be sharing that with you. And to get started, I'm going to take this little sample piece of knitting here, and it's smaller than the real hat. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to knit a one round stripe with this green. And I'm going to begin by knitting just a few stitches in the green. And I'm going to leave just a bit of a tail. I only needed to leave 2 or 3 inches, just enough to hang on to. And I will meet you at the end of this round. So here we are coming up on the end of our first one round stripe in green. I've got 2 more stitches to do in the red here. And what we're going to be doing now is creating a double stitch in green on the first 4 stitches of the round. And I'm going to do that by slipping the first stitch as if to purl, and it'll always be slip as if to purl. And then with the same, with the tip of the right needle, the same needle that's holding that stitch, I'm digging down into the stitch that green stitch came from, and I'm going to knit again. So there's now 2 green strands. Let me give a little tug to that tail. 2 strands of green on that stitch. I'm going to repeat it. Slip as if to purl, and notice how I'm kind of stretching out that stitch so that I can see, using the tip of my right needle to reach in and grab another strand of green, and 2 doubled up stitches now. I'm going to do it 2 more times. Slip as if to purl, reach down into that red stitch below the green, and pull up another stitch of green, 3 doubled up stitches. And here's number 4. Now, I did this from a picking perspective with the yarn sourced in the left hand. And what I'm going to do is undo these few stitches and repeat that from a throwing perspective with the yarn sourced in the right hand. So here we are again at the end of this first one round stripe in green, and I'm going to do those last 2 stitches. And now I'm going to be a thrower. And you real throwers out there are going to be much more graceful about this than I am, so please bear with me. But it's the same idea. I'm going to slip that first stitch as if to purl. I'm going to dig down to the stitch below, in this case the red stitch, with my right needle, and I'm going to wrap and throw, and here is my doubled up stitch on the needle. Might need to give that beginning tail a little tug, and now I'm going to do it 3 more times. Slip as if to purl, dig down into the stitch below that red stitch, create your new stitch, and doubled up stitch number 2. Here goes number 3, digging down again, and here's number 4, and that will do it. Now I'm done with my green, another little tug to the beginning tail, and what I would do now is trim this tail down to just about an inch. We'll be giving it a haircut on the backside later, but right now a 1-inch tail would be helpful. So we're done with our green, and now we're going to do a 2-round stripe with this blue. And very important things about to happen here. We're going to slide over, slip 4 stitches as if to purl. And here is where we're going to start the blue. Now you'll notice that we're not starting it in the same place that we started the green. In fact, we're not even starting it at the very beginning of this little circle of knitting, which was back here by this gray tail. We're deliberately starting it in another place. And the reason is that we want to have our starting and stopping places staggered throughout the hat, because if we did it all in the same place, this area of doubled up stitches would always be in the very same spot and would show. When we stagger it around the hat in different places, it's not going to show. It'll be there, but we won't notice it. So here I am, ready to start our blue. And again, I'm just going to hang on to a little bit of a tail, just a few inches, and start knitting. And I'm going to meet you at the end of this round. So here we are coming up on the end of our first round of blue, and I haven't been using markers because at this point, see, right now I'm working over those doubled up stitches in green, so I can feel that. I can feel that something's happening, so it's kind of waking me up that I'm near the end of my round. Here's my last few green stitches, and here I am at the end of round 1 of the blue. So it's time to create the doubled up stitches again. The doubling up of stitches is going to happen at the end of every first round of a color and the end of every last round of a color. So this is our first round in blue. We're ending it, so we're going to double up some stitches. Slipping one as if to purl, diving down into the stitch below that stitch on the needle. In this case, it's a green stitch. And creating the doubled stitch, 2 strands on the needle, tug of the tail, and doing it 3 more times. There's number 2, number 3, and number 4. And I'm going to keep on knitting this round, and I will meet you at the end of round 2. Here we are coming up on the end of our second round of blue, and I'm going to keep going here, and now I can feel and see the doubled up stitches, and I'm going to go through those 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and give a little tug. And by the way, this type of knitting is going to help strengthen your ability to count rows and see how many rows you've done. You've got it color-coded for you here, which makes it easier to learn. And you will see on my right needle, I have 2 rows of blue, 2 rounds of blue, one below the needle, one on the needle. And we look over to the left and we see the same thing, one blue stitch below the needle, one on. So that means that we're ready to create our doubled up stitches again. So I'm going to slip that first stitch as if to purl and dig down to the stitch below, which this time is a blue stitch because we're on our second round of blue. And I'm going to do that a total of 4 times. And there we are, we're all done with blue. And I am going to cut this in a moment with about a 1-inch tail. But what I'm going to do is slide over 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, slipping as if to purl. And that is being done to stagger the beginnings of the row, or the rounds. And we're doing that because we're using this doubled up stitch technique to minimize color jog and work in our tails as we go. And if we were to always do that at the very same place, the doubled up stitches would all be stacked up on top of each other, and they would become visible because that part of the hat would look different than the rest of the hat. The way that we're doing it, it's going to be staggered all the way around the hat, and it just won't be visible. So here I go, starting yellow. And with our yellow, we're going to do a 3-round stripe. And again, I started it by just knitting, leaving a bit of a tail. And I will be cutting that blue tail at about 1 inch in a moment. And I will meet you at the end of round 1. End of round 1 in yellow is coming up here. And as we've talked about before, you're going to do the doubling up of stitches at the end of every first round and every last round of a color. So this will be the first round, so we will want to double up. We're not quite there yet, but we can feel we're almost there because here's those 4 doubled up stitches. And from the old color, and now here's our stitches where our 4 stitches where we moved over to start our yellow. And now I'm going to do the doubling up again, give a little tug to that beginning tail, and slide over. I like that tail a little shorter than I like actually for a beginning tail because I need something to grab onto here. Okay, now there we reach down to the blue and there's our doubled up stitch. Second doubled up stitch, digging down into the blue. Third one. And fourth one. Yep, that was a little too small of a tail to be comfortable for me at this point. So at any rate, I like that beginning tail to be more like 2 or 3 inches. Ending one can be 1 inch. Now I'm going to knit that second round, and I'll see you at the end of the second round. Here's the end of round 2 and the doubled up stitches. Gonna knit through them. 4 doubled up stitches, so this is the real end of round 2. But you will remember our rule that we do our doubling up of stitches at the end of every first round and every last round. This is not a last round, so we really don't have to do anything special here. We're just going to keep knitting until we're at the end of our third round. But what I am going to do is I am going to actually put in a marker here. I haven't used markers very much because we can so clearly see when one color is ending and beginning, and we can feel those doubled up stitches. But when we have a 3 round or more rounds in a stripe, we don't feel those doubled up stitches, so it would be easier for me to sail right past this point next time. So I'm going to have this marker here to remind me. Here's the end of our 3rd round of yellow. And I've got the marker here to remind me, because I didn't have the benefit of doubled up stitches from round 2 because it wasn't the last round or the first round. And so let me get to that point. And just to review our row counting, I'm going to remove the marker here just to make it a little easier to see. And on our left side, we see 2 rows of yellow before the one that's on the needle, and on the right 1, 2, and 3 on the needle. So it's time to do our doubling up of stitches. I'm going to slide that one, knit, slip as if to purl, knit below the stitch on the needle, so we've got a doubled up yellow stitch, and repeat that till we've doubled up 4 stitches. And here's number 4. And now I'd cut my yarn, leaving that inch of tail, and I'm going to slip 4 stitches, again for a staggered start. And I'm just going to do just a couple of stitches of a new row in blue here. And again, we're doing those staggered starts because we don't want all those doubled up stitches to be piled up in one spot on our hat, because they would surely show. This way they're going to be sprinkled throughout the hat. Let me show you how that will look. So I'm looking at the inside of our hat, and you will see these little tufts all over. And that way, the doubled up stitches, the beginnings and ends of rows, are shared around the hat, and we really don't notice it all that much on the outside. The outside looks pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty darn good. And with our tails, what we'll be doing now is giving them a bit of a haircut. Now right here, I'm going to nip this tail to about 3/8, half of an inch, and I'm going to grab something pointy. I've got a chenille needle right here, and tease out that tail a bit. And you will continue to give a haircut to your piece on the inside and tease out those tails. And I hope these tips help you enjoy knitting the 21 color slouch hat or any stripy project of your choice. And I do hope you will visit us in Northwest Indiana at Sheep's Clothing when you can, in Valparaiso. And we will have a supplemental video talking about how to apply this technique to the crown decreases later. Thank you very much, and happy knitting.